Hello everyone, Aseya here. Today we have an amazing guest, my friend Lucas Gil Cantón. He has a very impressive background. He started first online business at 13, became one of the first successful gaming YouTubers in Spain or in overall Spanish-speaking community, and went on to create and run two different blockchain companies, became a partner at Grow Your Base, a metaverse company that raised $15 million and worked with some of the world's best brands like Walmart and Times Square, international speaker, blockchain expert, startup advisor, and investor.
Woo!
That's very impressive, Lucas. And I'm really happy that you agreed to come to my podcast. And today I want to know more about your background in terms of mental health, because now what I see that we are shifting from the hustle mentality in order to become more healthy without burning out and to create from the sustainable place. So tell us please, how did you get into tech and startup world to start with?
Yeah. Thank you, Aseya, for having me. I'm actually quite nervous. I'm usually not nervous for these things, but I think with you being a friend and with this topic also being relevant to me, it feels meaningful. So thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I got into startups very early on, as you mentioned. Online businesses in general, right? I come from a humble family in Spain, and I realized very quickly that there were not a lot of opportunities in the day to day. So the internet provided a big opportunity, right? I'm 27 now, so I grew up with Facebook and the first social media. I was very early to YouTube, and I've always had an entrepreneurial mind. And so I think, yeah, very early on, I started to discover, okay, there's something here. At the beginning, it was very messy. Those of you that were there will relate to make money, right? The first YouTubers didn't make money. You couldn't make money. Same on Facebook. But I started to see, okay, there's something here. People are starting to make money, and initially that was what attracted me to it, right? The potential to make money, to have opportunities. And then some years afterwards, I discovered blockchain, and that really excited me too, because not only for the financial side, but because of the potential I saw to really change the world and a lot of structures that I thought were outdated. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into tech. First through the internet, YouTube and whatnot, and then going more into the startup sector in Barcelona, where I'm from initially, and then internationally. I really like this idea of like creating something and having cool people and hustling. We'll talk about it, right? But hustling and then making something that's worth a lot of money and that impacts a lot of people. As a young teenager that comes from a normal neighborhood without a lot of opportunities, it was very exciting to me.
Awesome. That's amazing. And so it seems like you were one of the pioneers of YouTube. And yeah.
Yeah. I think I've always been good at somehow spotting trends early, right? So I was one of the very first in Spanish for sure, uploading videos and also watching. And then I was also one of the first streaming, and then I was also one of the first with NFTs afterwards, right? So I think I'm quite good, and I've been also found myself in a lot of trends very early on, which has been cool.
Awesome. I wanted to talk more about the hustle mentality. How was your relationship with work back then?
If I look back from where I'm at now, I would say very toxic in a lot of ways. I also think, and I think this is important to say, that I only am able to say what I say now because of that path that I've been through, and also because it worked, right? Like it gave me the money and the stability and the space to actually reflect about these things and now approach it in a different way. So I think it's always tricky, right? Because if someone doesn't have money, for example, and they need to make money or they want to make money, it might not help them to be like, oh, just take it easy. Maybe I certainly needed this mentality for a little bit. But now looking back, I see how a lot of it was driven by these needs for validation and to, become someone, right? As I said, for me, the money was a big thing. And I was one of these people, many people in the audience will relate, right? I wanted to be like Mark Zuckerberg back in the day, right? Like a billionaire and super successful and be interviewed. And, when I started going on interviews and podcasts, it felt very good. But there was a lot of tension. I would describe it as a very tense relationship, right? Because you've mentioned a lot of my successes, but I also had a lot of failures. These failures were very hard on me because I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I remember when I was at university, I had this friend, we would meet for coffee, for Subway. it was always very tense, right? Like, how do we make money? We need to work harder. We need to have other ideas. You go on Twitter, you go on Instagram, everyone is making money. We must be dumb. Like, how is this possible? So there was a lot of this constant like tension around like, oh, I need to get somewhere and achieve something. And until I get there, I will not be happy. And also the process doesn't feel so good, right? Like you kind of forget about it some parts, but it was very intense many times, right? Like when I was a YouTuber, I was still at school and I would go home after school, record the video. Then my computer was very bad. My internet connection was very bad. So I had to spend the whole afternoon and evening rendering the video, uploading the video, not being able to be on the internet because it took all the bandwidth of the internet. And that was my life basically, right? And then go to sleep and repeat. So it was a lot of hassle mentality and a lot of actual hassle for many years with very little going out, very little meeting friends or women or going to the club. And this sense of I have to make it and I have to work and I have to make this happen that got me here and also brought its own consequences and its own stress to my life.
Thank you for sharing with such details. And looking back now from the adult version of yourself, what advice would you give to your younger version, or what would you do differently?
It's a great question. I think, as I said, it's tricky for me because I see how I needed to go through that to learn everything I've learned. But I would say relax a little bit. And I would say something I think is very important, especially if people that hear us are younger and have this drive, right, and want to make it. Something I've realized with age is that anyone who's committed to something for long enough will make it. And I think this applies to all areas, but specifically here in business and startups and tech, I've seen it over and over. Like Warren Buffett talks about this in investing, right? But like if you stay long enough, right? Like if the next 10 years, I'm every day going to wake up and do something, some work towards startups, towards tech, so towards building, I generally think it's impossible that eventually there's not something that clicks and that works. And for me, it was this way. And I've met a lot of people that maybe were not the smartest even, or were not early to trends like I was. But I've learned that if you show up every day and if you, bring yourself and if you do again, and without needing maybe to have it so hard, so stressful. If you just show up, put passion, put work into it, eventually things happen, right? And I would say that to my younger self because I think he believed that it's an all or nothing game, right? It's like win or lose game. And like if I'm not making it work now, it means I'm doing something wrong. I need to work harder. I need to sleep less. I need to be smarter. And I think there's just an element for me of not knowing when things will arrive or not knowing what will be your biggest successes and of trusting almost at the same time that like, hey, again, if I show up every day, if I work, if I do things of value, eventually it will work. I don't know how, but eventually it will work. So that's what I would say. Relax a little bit because, because good things will come if you just keep showing it every day.
All right, awesome. So I wanted to talk more about aligned entrepreneurship and things that you are busy with right now. And could you please tell a little more about it?
Yeah, sure. So for some context, I was in this company group called Grow Your Base, a startup that grew a lot. We were very, very early to the whole NFT metaverse craze. It was insane. I had a lot of amazing experiences. I got to know a lot of Snoop Dogg, Gary Vee, Donna's manager, a lot of crazy experiences. And then it was also very tiring eventually because the guys listening, the people listening will know the startup has right. You know about it. I said to the grind, right? It wears down on you, wears you down. Eventually, I quit that at the end of 2024. Last year, I took a sabbatical year, which was very meaningful for me. And then after that, I realized that whatever I did next would have to come from what you said, from alignment, right? It would have to be alive. I cannot now, of course, I would if I needed the money, but I cannot just go back to a normal job. I've got a lot of offers to make a lot of money doing a lot of different stuff. But it didn't feel good. And so what I'm doing now, also because I feel like I don't really have a choice, it's like a calling. And the only thing that really makes sense for me, are things that really feel aligned with who I am, with kind of what I'm interested in. So right now, for example, I have a project with my partner Ben that's called Returning to Light, which might sound very hippie here for the audience, right? The name, but it's really about helping people with anxiety, with overwhelm, with depression, with things that I've struggled with and my partner has struggled with through different things, meditation, somatics. You teach somatics, right? So somatic techniques, community, also presence, and it's very interesting because I've told you about this before, but it's such a different way for me to do business, right? Because I had a lot of fun in my startups. It was very enjoyable at times, but there was never this connection with like the heart or with the passion or with the, oh, we're actually helping people like in a real way, right? Like we would help people make money. We would help companies launch marketing stunts. But now I'm really, I meet people and I see the change in them, and it feels very aligned. It feels very beautiful. And not only that, but also the way I conduct that business. My partner also comes from being very famous, one of the first people to do Facebook ads and become very successful. And so we know a lot about business, but how we're doing business now is very different than what we're used to, because it has to do a lot with respecting more ourselves and our internal state. And I talked before about tension, right? So it's okay to have tension, but to see, okay, what feels most aligned, what feels easier, right? I think for many of us in the startup world, we think it's hard. It's hard to make companies. It's, and everyone tells you, right? The Zuckerbergs of the world, the Andreessens, Ben Horowitz of the world, they tell you it's hard. This is very hard. I no longer think it has to be that hard. I think it's a belief. I think it's a choice in a way. It does not mean there's not going to be things that I don't want to do or whatever. But for me, aligned entrepreneurship, as you were asking, is about how do I find the thing moment to moment that feels the most aligned and impactful and almost easy in a way, right? Flowy. And I can expand more on this now, but yeah, that's how I would describe it. Like, how do we do business from a way that feels powerful and easy and flowing instead of tense and contracted and tight and struggling, right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting framework. And I guess that it may sound a bit difficult to understand for people who are in a very hustle mentality. What would be your advice for them to start feeling the tension? What I mean is sometimes
Right.
we just don't know when to stop and take a break.
Yeah, this is a great question. Because as you said, I've been there, right? And I've only gained awareness of a lot of things afterwards and after time and after space and after introspection. What comes up, I think I have quite a good analogy that I thought of earlier today, which is that I think for anyone listening, they will be able to relate to this thing where, for example, with friends, right? So let's say we want to do a plan with friends. You want to do a trip. You can easily feel at some point whether it's flowing, it's happening or not, right? So again, let's say I try to say in my friend group, hey, let's go to New York tomorrow, right? And then it can either flow easily and everyone is like, oh yeah, let's do it. It's exciting. Or for example, no one answers, right? And then if no one answers, maybe you feel like, wait, why is no one answering? You push again, you're like, hey, let's go to New York. And then someone is like, yeah, maybe. And we've all been in situations like this, right? I think another good example is in dating, right? Let's say you want to date, a woman in my case, and you ask her out and she says, no, I'm busy. You ask her out again. No, I'm busy. Ask her out again. And eventually you can feel this tension, right? Where even if she agrees to meet with you, or even if the friend group agrees to go to New York, it doesn't feel so good, right? Because it feels like you had to push through it. You had to like, okay, she's saying no, but I'm gonna try again, try again. And this is I think everyone will relate to this to some extent in daily situations. And this is what I mean when I talk about aligned entrepreneurship, right? And what you were describing of how can we notice this. I think we've all been in situations like this in business too, right? I would say it's very different, let's say, when you really want a client and you're really pushing and they don't give you much and they're not answering your emails, but you're like, come on, I need to get them. I need to get them. Versus the other side, which is maybe a client sees your website, they reach out for a demo, and then you hop on the call. They're like, oh, this is exactly what we've been looking for. Amazing. You close the deal easy. You're like, wow, I didn't have to do anything. And this is kind of the difference I'm looking at, right? And it's not only black or white. It's not like either it's tension or it's easy flow. But I think for the people listening, it can be helpful to start paying attention to that, right? Like, know that when I was in that culture, there were a lot of days that I was in the whole day very tense, right? Like I go on a meeting and then I'm tense and I go for a walk, but I'm very tense, like, oh, I'm angry, like this didn't go well. Another meeting, this doesn't go well. And then there's this tension. And maybe I didn't recognize at the time, or I didn't have a name for it, right? But now I see it and I'm like, oh, my body was very tense. I wasn't flowy. I wasn't enjoying. I wasn't relaxed. And so that's kind of what I would encourage people to notice, right? Not necessarily, again, not to get out of it, not to leave their job, but because I think it's good to be aware of like, oh, maybe I talk to this person and it feels more effortless. I go on this other meeting and it feels very tense, right? And then it gives us knowledge about ourselves. So I think even the noticing is quite powerful already.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. Noticing comes first, awareness comes first,
Hmm.
right? And in order to develop that awareness, it's very important to be a little bit educated about how the body works, because the body always comes first and it always
Hmm.
knows. And you can feel the tension in your back, in your stomach, in your
Hmm.
jaw. So I always tell to my clients to notice that first, and also I'm giving the
Hmm.
protocols to process it in the moment. The
Hmm.
tension, the stress doesn't build up and doesn't lead to burnout, because this
Right,
is the
exactly.
goal, right? To not get burned out.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what was the tipping point to get out of that hustle mentality? What made you to think of that?
I think you just kind of talked about it because I think I forgot to say it, but the reason I quit my last job was because I felt very burnt out. And it's funny because I didn't feel burnt out in the typical way, right? Of like having a crash and suddenly I cannot wake up and work. I had a few episodes of this throughout the years, but I think my burning out was eventually way deeper. It was this sense of just like hollowness, right? Like it's not exciting. I need to do this. At the end of my last company, I was getting paid very well. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities because I had been taking them away from me. And so it was very, very comfortable, right? I could live anywhere in the world. I was actually in Thailand. I live now in Thailand for a big part of the year. I was having an amazing house, a couple hours of work a day, but it felt very empty and it felt like every meeting was an effort and every email was an effort, and the projects that used to be exciting were not exciting anymore. They were just like, fuck, now I need to do this. And so I think some of the people might be able to relate to this, right? It was a very slow burn for me. It wasn't dramatic in the sense of I wake up one day and I'm like, fuck, I cannot move. It was, I had that sometimes and then I would recover. I would take a couple of days off. I would come back. But eventually all these years really took a toll on my health and on my nervous system. That's why I decided to take the sabbatical, which was very good. And honestly, it allowed me to, the first month of the sabbatical, I was just resting a lot because I didn't realize how much my body, as you said, the body knows, right? But in the business world, so many times we override the body, right? It's like the body tells you to rest, but no, I cannot rest. I need to work. Or with startup, this is very common, right? Where you're like, okay, I finish this project and then it will get easier. And it never gets easier, right? And there's another project, and the body, there's a tax, right? Every time you're like, okay, I do this and then I rest, but then you cannot rest, you're betraying yourself in a way, right? I think the body notices that somehow. And again, without making it spiritual or hippie, but just from a purely biological way, right? It's like the body needs rest, and rest leads to better energy. And I think for me and a lot of people in the hustle mentality, there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of, you cannot stop, right? Because if you stop, everything falls apart. Your competitors win. And now the way I approach business is like, no, I need the stops. The stops make me better when I execute, right? It's like a lion. A lion hunts for 20 minutes a day and then he rests so that when he hunts, he can hunt. When I move, I move. But when I'm not moving, I don't need to be in tension. I don't need to be the whole day like I used to do, checking Telegram to see if someone wrote me. And every time I get a notification, I'm with my friends, but I'm checking work. Eventually, I think this builds up. And for me, that was the tipping point that eventually I realized, fuck, the main source of stress and of lack of meaning in my life was my work eventually. Even though it was supposed on the outside, it was like an amazing job, very well paid, very little work. But inside, it just felt so hard. And so I needed to change. I was lucky that I could allow myself to do that, right? Like if I had a family and I didn't have money, it wouldn't have been the case. Yeah, I saw that that was not the way forward, that I could not do that 20 years more. And I did not want to do that 20 years more. And I also did not want to retire, right? That's the thing. I used to think, oh, I'm going to be 30, 35 and retire and then do nothing. But I realized, no, I like to create. I like to put things into the world, but it cannot be like this. It's not sustainable. It's not fun, right? So if I'm only trying to make money to retire, okay, I can push, and then use the money to pay for my health that I lost by pushing. But no, I want something more sustainable where I can have fun. Because I think if you like being an entrepreneur, you like creating, it's fun. But how can I do it so that it supports my body and my nervous system, and I'm not like having fun for a month and then crashing for 2 months, right? That was the question for me.
So thank you so much for coming to this podcast, and thank you for your valuable input, your valuable advice for people listening to these interviews.
Thank you very much, Aseya. Pleasure to be here. And yeah, if I can do just a final note, I think first of all, I really recommend people to check out the work you do and somatics in general. I think for people like me that come very from the mind, you'll find it hard somewhat, but also incredibly amazing because I was not connected to my body at all, right, for many years of my life. And I think this work you do and you show it opens really up a new world for people like me. So if you're someone that's listening to this and for me, for example, when I used to do these body scan exercises, right, where they say, "How does your body feel?" I always had no idea what that meant. I was like, "Oh, it feels good. It feels good," because I could not feel my body. If you are like that, or if you feel like you're very mental, very rational, which I think is common in startup people, please do try this stuff because I think it's very helpful. And the other thing is that if anyone wants to reach out to me also for support or for questions, maybe you can leave my Instagram, Aseya, and
Yes.
then yeah, I have nothing to sell, so I won't pitch you on anything, but I'm more than happy to support anyone that maybe resonated with this interview and has a similar path or any I don't know, or just liked what I said or had questions. I'm always happy to support and to listen to people and to exchange ideas. So I'd love if people also want to reach out to do so, and I'm more than happy to help them as well. And yeah, thank you so much for hosting this and for having me. And I hope it reaches a lot of people and can support some of them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.